Welcome one, welcome all to a slightly different edition of the Part-Time Preppers. Retirement, 1970s style. And I don't know, let's just call this Grandpa Zombie Club. We're going to talk about retirement in the old days. Now, for you people my age and a little bit below, a little bit over, you know all this. But for the younger people out there in the community, the 20-year-olds, the 25-year-olds, we're going to talk about retirement in the 70s. Yes, I've done a lot of videos. I mentioned my mother, my father, hand model's mother, brother. Never did a video talking about my grandfather, so we're going to do it right now. Now, it may be long and boring, but it's something I wanted to get out of my system. So we're going to talk about Pops. Yes, Pops. And this was Pops. I'll get to this in a minute. Um, it seemed like he retired young. He worked for a brewing company of a beer that's still in existence, a small beer. People in the Northeast may know it. If you're out west, you'll never heard of the beer. But he worked there for 25 years or so. They weren't rich people, my grandparents, but they seemed smart. And she actually was born in the United States, Springfield, Illinois, is my grandmother. And my grandfather was actually born in Italy, a small town outside of Rome. And he came over, he's like 6 or 7, because there's actually a picture of him I have with him in Italy with his family, which is interesting. And now they say picture here. I'm going to show you a picture of him. There you go. At Yankee Stadium, the guy in the middle, that was Pops. And that was my father sitting next to him, and my grandmother on the other side. And here, I'll show you another picture. Yes, that was my Pops on his house, his front porch, with my great uncle Frankie there, looking like President Roosevelt with the cigarette holder in his mouth. So there, a picture is worth 1,000 words. So there's Pops, and he retired young. He worked for that company 25, maybe 30 years, but he seemed like he was 60. Again, I was small during all this time. We lived away. We lived outside of D.C. and they lived up in Pennsylvania, but we used to visit quite a bit. My parents would go up there, and they'd come down to the where we lived, and 8 times a year at least we'd see them. So quite a bit growing up. And then when I was like 10, 11 years old, we moved up to Pennsylvania, literally about 4 blocks from where they lived. They lived in a nice street, residential, yet it was a busy street, but there was doctors, lawyers, funeral directors, a lady who owned a factory lived next to them, and my grandmother worked in a dress factory. Yes, a dress factory, made clothes, and she was a seamstress, and then became a supervisor. So she worked her way up through the ranks. My grandfather, I think, at the end was something special. He was, I think, head of the bottle capping department. So, and I did take one tour. I was only about 6 years old, 7 maybe. I have vague memories of where he worked and the big vats of beer and what have you. It just looked very big to me as a kid, like everything does. And but he retired. He retired. Humble life. They bought that house. They fixed it up. My parents lived there in that house, and on a nice street, like I said. And it wasn't the nicest house by any means on the street. There was a lot of houses that would qualify as semi mansions on that street, but their house was very, you know, it was tidy, yet definitely wasn't in the top 50% of houses on that street. But they worked hard. My parents lived there, and then when my parents moved out, they turned that house into a duplex. And they actually had tenants upstairs. Now, there was a college, again, only a few blocks away from that house. They used to mostly rent out to college kids. So they retired, or he retired first, and my grandmother still worked at the dress factory. They only had one car from when I can ever remember. It would always be a Chrysler Plymouth product, and they would get a new one every 5 years. Which in those days the cars probably only lasted 7 anyway. But they'd get a new one every a Polaris. I remember he had a black '67 Polaris. Oh, that thing was a boat. But anyway, um, I'm not sure how they did it, but I remember when he went part-time when he was about 60, 61 for a security agency. Once in a while, my father and I would pick him up because he worked odd hours. He only worked 4 or 5 days a week. He didn't overstress himself. He was still a strong, strapping man when he retired. I remember him carrying lumber around and helping my dad out. And she worked at the stress factory till she's about 65. Now he got a pension from where he worked. So he got a pension, he got a social security, they had a little rent income coming in, and they were doing okay. Retired people doing okay. They would go to Florida. They'd go to DC, pick up my aunt in DC and go to Florida for 3 weeks every winter. They would drive. They'd drive that Polaris, or he bought a brand new Coronet in 1974 with all the bells and whistles, vinyl top and fancy seats, yeah. But they would drive to Florida every year. One time in a snowstorm, I remember that story, but every year for 3 weeks. So that's how you want to live retirement. And they did go on vacations too. They went to Hawaii, saw Elvis Presley. They went to Italy. Yes, that was a big one for them. And that was only about 5 years before my grandfather passed away. So they had a good retirement and a stable. We would walk to the town square from where I lived. Like I said, I was about 11 when we moved here. We would stop at their house, me and my friend, and they would give us $5, $5 in the 70s. Wow, that was pretty good. That was a good tip just for visiting them. It got to the point where I was embarrassed to stop with my friend because I didn't want no money from them at one point. You know, I was like, don't stop giving me money. So they were not burdened. I don't think, and I would go shopping with them at times. I never saw a credit card, that's for sure. I do not ever remember seeing any plastic in that house. I think my mother only had one at the time in the 70s credit card. My father had none that I knew of, but it was a different type of life back then. Obviously, today you do not get big pensions, and maybe 5% of companies offer an actual pension where you just, keep getting money when you retire from them. And a totally different world. But that is like a little blast from the past. That's how things were back then. For you younger stackers, or you younger people in the community, it's a definite different world. Now, real quick, I keep showing you this club here. My grandfather worked several security jobs in his retirement. Now, one interesting one was he worked in a hospital, and my father, we'd always go visit him when he was on the job, for a few minutes. And I remember him being at a hospital, and he was packing heat. Yes, he was the security guard packing heat at the hospital, had a .38 revolver on his side, and he had his little security outfit on. And I find that interesting because, I think most hospitals today, they don't pack it. They should. I think at this point, the way the world is, they should pack a little heat. But he was packing heat back in the early to mid 70s at the hospital. That was interesting how times have changed. And then he worked, one of his jobs was guarding a warehouse on the night shift. It was a big trucking company. It was maybe 5, 6 miles from our house. And you'd always see tractor trailers there parked. And he would guard it. And all he did, for some reason, he couldn't pack heat at that job. So he had this club. This was all he had in his uniform. I'm not sure if he had mace. But he had that and the alarm, because I remember him joking with my dad. Well, if someone breaks in with a gun, I'm going to hit the alarm, I'll throw this club and run. And so I always remember him telling that story. And yes, this is something that was handed down. I've never done really anything to it except change the strap here. Yeah, I had a little battle wound here at the top, but I don't think I'll ever sand it down. I think I'd just leave it as is. It's a little top heavy, but it would definitely do some damage if you got whacked with it. Wouldn't be my first choice of a self-defense item, but definitely has a lot of history. And it's a keeper. I'll be passing that down to my son. And at the very end, before he actually stopped working, period, which I guess he was about 67, 68 tops, he became school crossing guard for 2 years, I remember. And here, I'll show you another memento here. So I want all you young folks out there, I want you to stop. Yes, this was his sign, and it's a well-made sign. It's not plastic. No plastic. We got metal. This may work better than the Billy Club. Really, it would. Slice your head off, maybe. I don't know. But yes, he carried this. My mother gave me these items when he passed away. And he, from what my grandmother talks about, he was quite loved as his school crossing guard days, giving the children clothes and candy, I believe, sometimes. Yes, he was very generous. And but they lived a full life in retirement. I mean, he lived a good 17 years, and she outlived him. She was only a year younger. She had a good 20, 21 years at least. I was dating the hand model when he passed away, and when we got married, the hand model and I. And by the way, when they did pass away, it wasn't like they were penniless. They left a small inheritance to my mother and my mother's brother, my uncle. Uh, they were never handed any big, prize winnings or nothing. These two people, they worked hard, and they got a decent retirement in the end. And they enjoyed themselves, and it was nice to see them, that way. Nowadays, for you younger people, it's not going to be that way. That's why I have to stop, think, listen, study. You got to diversify. It's those days are over. They're over for me. You're not going to be getting big pensions. You got to. Hopefully, if you're in your 20s, I want you to sit down and think about things. My son, he's in his 20s. He's diversifying already. I lectured him. He's got a little bit in savings. It's always good to have a little fiat on hand. He's got his 401k at work, which half of it is conservative. Unfortunately, half he has in the stock market, but that's up to him. You have to study in your own and decide what you want to do with that. A little bit in gold and silver. He had one of those windfalls they talk about once, and he went out and bought 2 ounces of gold and small amount of silver with it. And but you have to diversify. You have to think out of the box because I'm only like 4 or 5 years from retirement, and it comes fast. And you got to plan ahead. Now, hopefully, I think me and the hand model did a decent job of planning, and so we'll see how that goes. But I just want you to stop and think about it. Like if you can save $20 a week, don't go to Starbucks. Don't buy that extra meal at work. Especially if you can brown bag it for a quarter of the price. Think about saving something. Put it away. Put it in a something that you can't touch all the time. Don't use that credit card constantly. I mean, that's the way of the world, credit cards. There's so much credit. People very easily get in over their heads. Easily. My son once got a little bit over his head when he was a little younger, and he learned his lesson there. But he's all doing well as far as that's concerned now. But you got to stop, think, listen, plan, even in your 20s. And that's all I have. I hope this rant didn't take too long, although it seems like it's been a long video. And we are celebrating, and back to the Billy Club there, we are celebrating 4 years on YouTube. Yes, this week, 4 years. And if you actually was able to get through this entire ranting old man, I have the old, in honor of Grandpa, I got, look at, these are the type of slippers he wore. The hand model got me a pair. So I put a pair on for this video. And, oh, that's the fireplace, by the way. Yes, that's, we had a natural fireplace. It was nice. It was cute. A little smelly sometimes. And not efficient. We put this gas insert a few years ago. Actually, probably 4 or 5 years ago. It's worked nice. Keeps the whole downstairs warm. And I have the fan on low now so you can hear me. But in celebration of our 4 years, okay, let's get to this quick. We are just giving away, and you actually stomach this entire video. We're just giving away something small here. Don't get too excited. It's only 4 years. 2 copper Zombucks. There's the Merc Diem. I'm trying not to get my mug in this video. And, oh, one of my favorites, the Barber. Yes. So, if you watch this whole thing and you want a chance to win these 2, just put in the word POPS anywhere in the comments. POPS. P-O-P-S. So, that's all I have. And it's been a great 4 years, by the way. Really, there's so many people. They're like extended family. I think you guys know. You meet so many nice, fine people, generous people. Just incredible. And the prepping community, too. But I think if you know me and my channel, you know, I do a lot of stacking videos and probably 10 to 1 compared to prepping videos. But I do like both worlds there. And that's it. I thank you guys all for watching over the years. And wow, 4 years. I hope another 4 years go by without a hitch. And that's it. I got nothing else to say. I'm out of breath. I got to drink my coffee before it gets cold. So be good. Take care. Keep stacking. Till the next time. So long from the part-time preppers.